Hi, you've tuned in to Radio Northern Beaches, your Listen Local station, right here on the Northern Beaches of Sydney. You can find us on your radio dial at 88.7 and 90.3 FM. Can't get to a radio? No worries. You can always stream our program live from anywhere in the world at rnb.org.au. And for listening on your own schedule, our podcasts are available globally at rnbpodcast.com.au. So be sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Now, here is our latest podcast.
Hello again, listeners to Community Radio Northern Beaches, 88.7 and 90.3 FM, streaming live on our website, www.rnb.org.au. I'm Michael Lester, the program's Community Voices. About now and each year in Australia, there's an event called Refugee Week, and I think it's here in June this year with us again. I've been running for many years. Generally, I guess, an event designed to improve community awareness about what Australia does with refugees, the contribution refugees make, and how we meet and provide safe pathways and humanitarian objectives in pursuit of supporting refugees coming. I believe Australia actually has, I think over 1 million refugees we've accepted historically since about the 1950s, who've joined the community here and contributed from many different countries and regimes about the world, seeking safety and freedom here in Australia. Latterly, of course, in recent years, the number of refugees around the world just continues to grow, and the demands for refugees to find safe havens increases. Australia, I must say, in that time too, seems to have created a fair few obstacles in the way of refugees, and some of its policies call for reforms to make stronger support for refugees. In any event, in that context, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to talk about some of these issues with our guest today from the Northern Beaches, from an organisation, a voluntary organisation on the Northern Beaches Refugee Sanctuary. And our guest is David Addington, who's been with that organisation, voluntary organisation, since it started its activities and is now joining us. Thanks very much, David Addington, for joining us.
Thanks, Michael. Nice to be with you.
David, you were there, I believe, since your organisation, a voluntary organisation in the beaches, has been established, about 2002, over 20 years ago, and you've been involved in a lot of activity there. I'm just wondering, at a personal level, how you came to be involved in these issues and what your motivation was as an individual to become involved in refugee support activity.
So I guess it started for me in 2001 when the Tampa came and they were met with, armed troops in rubber duckies and turning them away. And I guess I sort of naively felt that, Australia was a country that welcomed people. We're obviously a signatory to the 51 Convention, which allows any asylum seeker to come and seek refugee status here. So we thought, being idealistic, I was part of the Manly Catholic Church, and we formed this group, and we thought, we can put some, people will listen to our voice, will lobby government, etc., and that was spectacularly unsuccessful. But while we were doing that, we heard of Ian Byrne, who was a local solicitor, who was a member of the group, had heard about a group in Coffs Harbour called Sanctuary, run by Peter and Sue Hallam. And they had been doing this sort of work for quite some time. They'd been sponsoring refugees and then helped them settle in Australia. So we looked at it and thought, Northern Beaches, it's not going to be an area designed to accept a lot of refugees, primarily because it's expensive. And when you, almost by definition, refugees are really poor. So we thought, what else could we do? And I had no idea, but Australia's refugee program is divided effectively into two groups. One group which is sponsored by the Australian government, so they take recommendations from the UNHCR, the United Nations Human Rights Commission, on refugees, and they will have a country, let's say Syria, which is which is destructed over the last few years, and they'll recommend to Australia we should take some refugees from Syria. They'll make recommendations. Australia will do research on the people. They'll undergo medicals. They'll also undergo character tests. And we try and work out who will make good citizens in Australia, and then they will be offered visas. And the second half of the program is under the Special Humanitarian Program. which are also, they've got the same qualifications to be a refugee, the UN one. So there's 4 criteria. Basically, you've got to show that your life's in danger because of who you are. You've got to show that, effectively, it's something to do with either race or religion or gender or sexuality. Maybe one or two I've missed. And then the third question is, can you stay in the country you're in now? And fourth question is, will you have a reasonable prospect of settlement in Australia? In other words, that you will be successful when you get here. But those people, and that group at that stage was 8,000 people under that visa category, they have to pay their own airfare. And in the year before we started, in 2001-2, as I understand it, about 1,000 people who'd been granted those humanitarian visas hadn't actually come to Australia. And clearly, if you're in a refugee camp, which people all describe to me as truly horrific, you don't change your mind. Some may have died, and very occasionally you'd be lucky enough to have 2 countries offer you refugee status, but most of them didn't come because they couldn't afford it. And so we felt, we're a wealthy area. We've got, friends and, community, and maybe we can ask them to kick some money in, and maybe we can help 1 or 2 families with a loan. Would have a rotating interest-free loan scheme that would see if we could help some of the people to come. And that's how we started. So our first family, it took us about 6 months to get going. And the first family arrived in June of 2003. It was a family of 5 who came from Sierra Leone. And then, they repaid the money. We had some fundraisers. We asked people for donations and people gave it to us. And here we are, 22 years later, and we've helped just on 9,500 people come to Australia.
Wow, that's a big number. So this is designed, as you say, for this second category of humanitarian visa possibilities. But as you say, these people in that category, even if they meet the criteria, often just can't afford it. And so your program is directed, is it, at basically financing the trip here, for which you seek repayment. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So that we would, so for instance, today I paid for the airfare of 2 people coming from there. They're coming from Beirut and coming to Sydney, and the airfares in total was that they were short of was $1,700. So we lend them the $1,700. They'll repay us at the rate of $40 a fortnight, and that'll take nearly 2 years to repay. Refugees qualify for Centrelink benefits from day one. And of course, many of them start working fairly quickly. And then what happens is they start working and they pay off the loan more quickly, and we help the next family.
How much of a risk factor is in there, given the many hundreds, I think even thousands you've said you've done since then, about 9,000 that you've provided financial assistance to, which is quite a large number. Is there a risk factor? And in all cases, are these loans repaid or?
So over that period of time, we would have loan losses of somewhere about between 1.25% of 1%. And those would almost exclusively be people who have either died or have had, a catastrophic problem with their health, mental or physical. I think of the people we helped, I can only think of one family, and that was right back early on, who, in my view, didn't make much of an effort at all to repay, but pretty much everybody else has repaid, as I say, less than half of 1% don't repay. So, 9,500 people, that's about, 45 families, I guess. 45 people who have not repaid us, maybe slightly more. And yeah, look, I mean, they don't sign any binding contract. I mean, just fundamentally, they call me up and say, "Can I help?" And yeah, I say yes. And will you give me the money back afterwards? They say yes, and that's what they do. I mean, they know that the money that they repay helps the next family.
Well, that's a remarkable track record of success, in quotes unquotes, with successful resettlement, obviously, and the capacity to pay in a whole new environment for themselves to pay back this loan. It begs the question, I guess, about what sort of criteria you're applying in terms of to whom you will provide this and offer this financial support.
So we have two criteria. First criteria is that they have the humanitarian visa, the 202 visa. and not the community sponsorship one, the one that is the general visa. And secondly, that we have money in the bank at the time, and if they have to wait a bit, they will tell them what the waiting time is. But there's no other criteria as long as they know that they agree they'll repay it, and we've got the money, we'll help them.
Oh, and how do you identify these people? I mean, presumably there's a lot of people in this category. I think you were saying, aren't there a lot of applicants, are there, for these visas? Many of whom I think you said are actually turned down anyway, in terms of getting access, having applied for this particular visa. Even those that accept, apparently, I think you were saying, were you, that only maybe even half of those who accept actually ever arrive here?
No, no, no. The huge numbers of people apply for the visas. I mean,
Uh,
as you were saying before, the number of number of refugees in the world goes up and up, and
yep.
the UNHCR says it's more than 100 million people globally, and you might be surprised to hear that. Yeah, currently it's a bit difficult to know because America is all over the place on the refugee program, but really there's only three countries, depending on whether America's taking them or not, and it's always a bit difficult which day of the week it is to know what they're doing. But the Canada and Australia are the people who take most under what they call the settlement programs. I mean, most refugees are obviously in the third world, places like Lebanon and Jordan and Turkey, and they have huge numbers. Pakistan, Iran have huge numbers of refugees, and in Africa, the surrounding countries to wherever the war zone is have huge number of refugees. But most of them are in refugee camps with no prospect of settlement in that country. Whereas Australia has, like Canada, has a program where we offer, last year it was about 20,000 people, a permanent solution. So you get a visa, you can come to Australia, if you don't break the law after, I think it's 4 years, you can become a citizen, and then you can stay here indefinitely. And those people now, the ones who get the humanitarian visa, they all come. Because there are processes for them. Either we'll lend them money or their family can borrow the money, but they all come. That's my understanding. But the people who apply, the last numbers I saw were 80 odd thousand applications for 80,000 people applying for effectively about 8,000 positions. And so yeah, it's really really hard to get a refugee visa.
So I'm still not necessarily clear on how you identify particular individuals, because presumably you can't support all the ones that might be eligible for your sort or need your sort of
Yeah,
that
so
finance. So
yeah,
how do you
so
actually?
we're
Yep.
just based on money, Michael. If we've got the money, we'll help.
Yes.
So the groups that we've helped the most, say in the last year, would be coming from that'd be Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and then a smaller number from Africa, DRC and Burundi. Those communities themselves, obviously, there's networks in Australia, and if you're in a refugee camp somewhere and you need help, somebody's got a visa going to, you hear about someone going to Australia, they obviously talk among each other. And the people who are newly arrived that we've helped, they obviously talk to their friends back home. And so our name gets out there and they come seeking us. They come also through community groups. I mean, we've helped quite a lot of people who were associated in one way or another with the Australian Defence Force in Afghanistan, interpreters or families of interpreters. Work very closely with three different community groups of from the Middle East, so Iraq. So they would be, Assyrian, Chaldean, just different community groups. So they would be from different tribal groups or religious groups. And if we've got the money, we help them.
Our guest here on Community Voices Radio Northern Beach is David Addington. David is the founder, or one of the founders, and the chairperson these days of the group Northern Beaches Refugee Sanctuary. Been operating since about 2002, helping a few thousand people in that time with finance to come out to Australia on their visas, under humanitarian visas. We're talking with David particularly on the occasion of Refugee Week here in Australia, an annual event to increase awareness of refugees in Australia, maybe even to increase acceptance and understanding of the need of these people in being resettled safely, but also their contributions that they make over the long term to our society. David, just on the bigger picture about countries, you mentioned the countries that you've helped people from. But again, is that because they're the only countries that are coming in under the program and that you're talking about, the 202 visas that you're assisting, or is that a selection of the countries?
So the Australian government allocates based on perceived need, and they also try and match up. So, look, I'm not an expert, and someone from Immigration Department can
Right.
tell you, but it certainly would appear as though they'll take, sections of different countries. So, we've helped people from 49 different countries.
Wow.
Sorry, 49 different citizenships,
Wow.
including stateless people. We don't see many of the people that come from the Southeast Asia. Those communities seem to have organizations that help within the group, which is fabulous. They've built up that community strength. Yeah, so we'll help whoever when we see them, we do. We don't actively go seeking people. I mean, we're a small group, and we figure we probably help 15% of those who came on the humanitarian visas
Aha.
over the
Right.
last couple of years.
Right.
And that just takes the edge off the ones who maybe would not be able to get here without our help.
Talking about that broader picture and countries, our policies do reflect certain political views, presumably about countries that countries come from. I'm thinking, I don't know what relevance, for example, I don't think you've mentioned Palestine as a source of refugees, but I believe there's been lots of applications from Palestine over even recently, and big rejection numbers just straight out, and a fairly small responsive rate of people who actually get through. Does that imply that, from your point of view, you haven't had access to supporting people from Palestine, or?
So we've helped, I think, maybe 10 people over the time from Palestine. We haven't seen, and that may be because they have other ways of arranging their travel. As I say, I'm not an expert on
Right.
allocation, but the Immigration Department would have a site where they say how many people come. They may not be one of the countries at risk. I mean, there are lots of places in the world, obviously Ukraine, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Palestine. At the moment, the country with the biggest number of refugees, I think, that have been generated in the last year is Sudan, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And Syria have been really big parts of the refugee program in the Middle East. So yeah, look, I'm not an expert, and I wouldn't like to say about Palestine, but no, we haven't seen many Palestinians seeking help.
You mentioned earlier the origins of your interest and commitment to what you're doing with your fellow volunteers in your organization, Northern Beaches Refugee Sanctuary. But how, in the early days, I think you said, did you, that it arose out of the particular circumstances at the time and our attitudes towards refugees, but that you were concerned to try to lobby and influence government policies on refugees at the stage, but you said not without much impact. Is that what happened? And does that imply that you've moved away from any sort of interest and concern and activity about lobbying on refugee policy?
Yeah, we tend not to get involved in it, and it's not because of any rebuff by government. It's you have a certain amount of time you can allocate to voluntary work, and I guess you try and go in the area where you think you can be most successful in terms of in terms of what how you allocate that time. I mean, organisations like the Refugee Council of Australia and Asylum Seeker Centre, and I mean many of those organisations are lobbying government. I guess my view is that we felt we could help in a small way, and we'll just tick along on that one.
Yeah. And you're doing it out of the Northern Beaches too. And I guess that, is it that the way your modus operandi doesn't necessarily involve any face-to-face contact with the people you're assisting at any point in this? And it certainly seems from what you've said that these refugees that come that you assist can end up all over Australia, and that basically they're not necessarily got any connections to the Northern Beaches, even though you're operating as a group out of the Northern Beaches.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We've helped people to every state and territory. Most people come to Melbourne and Sydney, and then say Adelaide and Brisbane would be the next tier, and then a few to Perth. But we've helped them to Darwin and Tasmania as well, and the ACT. When we first started, we were the community we work with most closely was Sierra Leone, and we helped a lot of the Sierra Leoneans come between, say, about 2002 and maybe 2008 or 9. They then had a peace treaty in the war in Sierra Leone, and so they started to lose. The allocation was moved to other deemed to be more difficult places. And originally we had a lot to do with the Sierra Leone community. Went to a lot of community events, but I'm old and getting tired, and it's just the thing that we need to do, I guess, is we see as the finance side, and there's lots of people who help refugees. I mean, there's migrant resource centres, there's community groups. If you're looking at the Middle East, Assyrians who've been a big part of our group that we've helped, then also Syrians and Iraqis, they've already got community groups that help. And so, we do our bit, other people do their bit, and hopefully it all works together.
What's the nature of your organisation in terms? I understand it's a voluntary organisation. I guess it's so-called would be a not-for-profit. Would it? And what's the nature of your membership or volunteers? And what sort of roles and activities do they contribute as volunteers?
So as I said, we started as a part of the Manly Catholic Church, and then in about 2015 or 16, the laws basically changed in terms of working as a charity, that you had to be a separate entity. So we incorporated, I think, in 2018.
Right.
We have a committee of 10 people. Our activities are primarily making sure that there's probity around our loaning, and that our audits are the funds. I mean, we've got $1.3 million in cash that we lend. So over that period of time, we've probably lent $15 million. So we're making sure that that money has not been stolen or that it's been used inappropriately. We're a registered charity, so we report to the Australian Charity Commission, ACNC, and we have meetings where we have board meetings where we discuss what we're doing and making sure that everything works as it's supposed to. Yeah, I guess that's it. It's the committee. Most of the committee have been on it for a very long time, and it's I think all of us would feel the same way. That most people want to contribute to society one way or another, and this is the way we thought that we could.
That's great. And what about fundraising? How do you raise these funds, and from where?
So pretty much everything comes from donation. We send out a newsletter, and we have it on our website. And people are very welcome to go and look at that. And if they want to make a donation, we're obviously always grateful to receive them, and for which we, they get a tax deduction. And that's pretty much it. So mostly it's been friends or friends of friends. We did a number of fundraising events early on, but they're a lot of work. A lot of the money that you raise ends up in, costs of raising those. If you have a dinner, a lot of the money goes to the place where you eat. And I guess one of the things we're really proud of is that the only expense that we've had since we started effectively has been the bad debts and the Centrelink. So many people repay through a Centrelink payment, and Centrelink charges us 50 cents per payment. And those are our only expenses. And we've tried very hard to make sure that it stays that way. So any of the committee who, need a computer or a phone or whatever, those are all expenses for them and not for the group.
So obviously you focus on raising money through donations in the way you've explained, and that must be important to keep up what you're doing. Are you looking in that sense for any other people to, in a sense, become volunteers and to join you? Or is it basically you've got what you need there, it's running, you've got the expertise, knowledge and systems to run it, and basically as long as you keep the money coming in, you're doing what you're doing, or volunteers thought?
So no, that's pretty much it, Michael. We've got a group. We don't have any need for extra people in, although, at some stage there's going to be generational change and we'll need to look at it then. 96% of the money that we paid in airfares last year came from repayments of loans, so that the fundraising is a part of what we do. But in terms of the amount of people we help, it's only about 5%. Well, not only, because obviously we're deeply grateful for the money, but most of this money has literally come from refugees themselves who are paying the loans so that they can help other people.
Well, it's sort of like a revolving fund, isn't it?
It is, yeah, yeah, like what they call nils, or no interest rate loans, yeah.
Well, that's a wonderful model. Well, look, it's been absolutely fascinating to hear about the work that you're doing and the scale and impact of what you do here in support of incoming refugees to Australia. It's a great commitment, which you seem to be delivering with great efficacy and effectiveness and impact, I have to say. It's been a real pleasure and insightful talking with you here on Radio Northern Beaches. I've been speaking with David Addington from the Northern Beaches Refugees Sanctuary, who has this very unique model, I think, of providing financial assistance in the ways we've discussed. Thank you very much indeed, David, for taking the time to join us, and all the
Th
best with your future work.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you.